It should be running. Yeah, it's running.
Okay. Cool. Okay. Well, hello everyone. I'm in Somerset, so the Wi-Fi is a bit rubbish. Not going to lie, a bit stressed. But thankfully, these sessions are now they are now sort of with a guest speaker, and this session is all about branding. So I invited Mark Coster from Pixooma to help me answer the question. So if I disappear at any point, I will, Mark will even more take the reins. So ask any questions, either, unmute yourself, or Mark, if you can kind of go around. I can't see everyone who's on, so
okay.
Work your way around, or you can post it in the chat and Mark can read it out and we can answer it together. And I'll probably put myself on mute when I'm not talking, just so that I'm not disturbing anyone if there's any background noise here. So there we go. So welcome. So if anyone has got a burning question about branding, please sort of ask away.
Shall I ask a question? Isn't branding just a logo?
Do you want to go for that first, Marie-Louise, or shall I?
If you could answer that, because there's a couple of people like, I can't find the link to get on the Q&A.
Oh, okay,
so I'm just going to answer that. So
yeah.
I'll hand over to you for that one.
Yeah, I mean, the terms branding and corporate identity and logo, all these things get muddled together, really, I think. And, as designers, we use them we mix them up a bit as well. But I think to my mind, the best definitions are that your brand is what people say about your business when you're not there. That's the brand that you build. So that's the simplest definition of it. It's what people think of, or what emotions they have, what they think of, and how they view your business and your company. And like I say, when you're not there, what they might say about you. It's what they attach all that stuff, all that feeling, all that emotion to your corporate brand, your corporate identity. That is all the stuff that you control, all the colors and the fonts and the style, the tone of voice that you use in everything you do, the style of imagery, how you market yourself, all that, any marketing you do online, in print, and all of that starts with the logo. So the logo is not the whole thing, but it is the key. It's what I sort of refer to as the keystone of your branding, of your corporate identity. It's what holds everything else together. And so, yeah, in answer to that question, no, it's not just a logo. The brand is a much bigger thing, and the brand itself actually is a much bigger thing than just your corporate identity. But they all merge together. Your logo needs to be appropriate to your business and needs to represent you properly. The branding needs to be built around that. Your corporate identity needs to be built around that, and then hopefully that leads to a brand that people respect and attach good thoughts to when they think of your company. Examples I tend to use are things like McDonald's and Microsoft and Ryanair. When you look at their logos or you see their companies or you think of them, you attach emotions to it. So some good, some bad, but it's sort of all attached to that logo, really. So it is very important.
And I can sort of add to that when someone comes to you or I or another branding designer for a logo, there's a lot of work that we do in the background and questions that we ask, which are things like all that sort of stuff that helps shape what we deliver. So it's understanding what your message is, who you are, if you're a small business owner and you're very much your own brand, as it were. It's a lot more connected. So it's so much more than just that's your logo, that's one part of it. It's people can go to the lengths of what clothes they're wearing, what they're showing up with, not that you can really see, but I've got my aqua necklace that I wore in my branding shoot last year, so I've part of my branding colors. So I show up with how with what I'm wearing and doing, is part of that. You know, people might not be consciously aware of that when they're watching what you're doing, but it does play a part of that. So yes.
Absolutely.
Any other questions? Next question. All about branding.
Nicola's got a question.
Well, I'm just starting out. I think a couple of you know me from FSB, and I have literally, the logo has been something that I obviously need to get started with, but in my sort of first few steps, I feel that it's more important to me to get business in rather than spend money on branding as such. But I don't know whether maybe I should be putting more emphasis on that. I mean, I've got, you talked about personal brand, and I feel that, you know, a lot of people do know me, so they have a fair idea, but I don't really know where to start, quite honestly. So sort of beginners, baby steps.
Well, I think with that, from my point of view, is that there's no right or wrong way. I mean, that's where I've kind of gone down the rebranding of myself and focusing on helping people evolve over time, because particularly startups, you have a limited budget. Often you're doing stuff yourself. You don't have a big budget to sort of maybe invest in the most top quality designer or agency and stuff like that. And I guess that's where the DIY approach of maybe using something like Canva can help. It's not perfect or ideal, because obviously, you know, you're possibly using a template, you're not a trained designer, yada yada yada, but having something is better than nothing, and you can tweak it over time, you can invest it. So yes, getting out there, equally, if you can set aside some money and invest in your branding and figuring, you're going to have a much better result. What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, I'd agree. I think it's there is no fixed answer. Everyone's business is different. There's a cliched word. I do hate using it, but I can't think of anything better to replace it with, and that is, it's a journey. You know, it's not a destination. You things evolve. You grow the stuff. And I've only ever had one client who was backed by a millionaire investor. Most people are doing this with their own money, and there's a limited pot of money you can use for 100 different things you need to do right at the start, and only you can really pick which bits of that are the most critical to get sorted. So that's what I'd say. First of all, it's something you can build along, and people, you know, I'm sure Marie-Louise gets this as well. People apologise. They come along and say, "Oh, could do with a new logo." Sorry, I did the first one myself. Well, that's perfectly natural. I did my own website myself as well. Now I get it built by somebody else who knows better what they're doing. But that's all part of it. I think what I tend to say is a good logo, no matter how good it is not going to solve your business problems. It's not going to bring you new customers all on its own. It's not going to solve any of your process issues. It's not going to solve any of your overall marketing issues if you've not got a decent strategy, that sort of thing. But it is, I think, the sort of groundwork for a solid brand, and it helps build that brand better. Without that, you need some sort of visual aspect. And what I would say is that there's so many different ways you can do it initially as a DIY approach, as long as it I think it fulfills the sort of basic criteria of it being simple. Keep things simple. Don't go for some complicated massive sort of fine art illustration or something, because you're going to have problems with using that elsewhere, because it's, you know, if you're trying to embroider it onto something, I'm pointing the wrong side of the shirt. If you're trying to embroider it on something, or you want to engrave it into something, or etch it into, I don't know, print it in a single color or whatever, you're going to have problems. So keep it simple. Keep it appropriate to your business. So that doesn't mean that it has to say what you do. In fact, no big brand ever says, the logo ever says what they do. But keep it appropriate, keep it simple, appropriate to you, and then you'll get the versatility you need. You know, depending on where you get it done and how you do it, you're not necessarily going to get vector file, which is the ideal way of doing it, but there are ways and means around that in the short term. And yeah, as long as you sort of follow those, then you can then look at it, appraise it again, at a later date and say, well, okay, now I think this doesn't represent me in the same way. You will have some technical issues if you go through the route of using any stock imagery, and potentially if you go sort of to a very cheap and cheerful sort of online service, because you may end up then having something that's not bespoke to you. It might be a clip art type thing, which is fine, but you're not going to get that. You're not going to get that sort of bespoke aspect to it. And you might find that, well, you quite often when you start doing these things, you suddenly see 10 other companies have got a similar thing that they've done because they've used the same artwork or whatever. Now, no designer could ever say that what they're going to produce for you is absolutely unique. You know, there's 7 billion people on the planet. It's impossible to say that this is, you know, even though we've come up with it from scratch, that it's utterly unique in that sense. But we would do the research to try and find out from your competitors, and you can do searches online to try and make sure you're not emulating something that already is quite similar. But there's loads of big brands that are similar anyway. So I think that's the only thing I would say.
There's sort of design trends, isn't there? So there's always going to be
there's
fashions,
one sort of like two halves of a disc sort of shape, just sort of a swoosh sort of thing. I've seen an angle. It was an angle. Looks like a sort of it's like a swoosh sort of thing. I've seen that dozens of times in different formats and different ways. It's just what somebody's picked up from somewhere else. So that's the only thing I'd say. And I'm trademarking my logo currently. And obviously, if you don't have something that is bespoke, and hopefully you can't have fairly unique, but it's distinctive, then you're going to have a problem if you wanted to trademark it later on. But I agree entirely with Marie-Louise. I think it's.
And on that, a big no-no is just going on Google or another search engine and finding an image and just using that in your logo, because you won't have the image rights. It's quite tricky. There is, I will be getting a guest speaker on about trademarking within, Canva, and using Canva for logos, and what are the copyright issues around the elements. But it's such a big topic on its own, and I've done a bit of research myself on it, but I'm not a legal advisor, so covering that will be a sort of different topic there. Yeah. So has anyone else got sort of any further questions sort of on that topic, and we can always cycle round.
Hands, nobody raised their hand.
It's a question around colour. So I've seen these charts where different colours sort of like relate to the either type or feeling of the business. So green, I guess, suggests, of the earth and friendly and natural and those sorts of things. So is there much credence in that, in terms of using the colour spectrum in an appropriate way to represent what your business does, or the values of your business, or the feeling of your business?
Did you want to go first on that, or shall I?
Yeah, I can answer. So I would say absolutely. So when people come to me with a logo brief and they're sort of saying, I want green, or I want to avoid that colour, there's so many different shades and hues and versions of a colour. I mean, if you think of the colour green, for example, you've got the whole like dark forest green, you've got apple green, grass green, all the looking around in nature, and obviously you've got like bright fluorescent highlighter green as well. You've got all these different shades, and how they're used in combination with other colours will impact sort of how that logo and that brand is perceived. So sort of brighter, lighter colours, maybe a more high energy. So like a highlighter green, fluoro green, is going to be sort of maybe quite youthful, or it could be quite a throwback to the 80s, that kind of thing. Versus if you want something that is sort of maybe feels very organic, maybe it's more like a softer sagey green, or maybe it's about trust, and so maybe a very dark forest green, which is sort of more serious, could be used. So there's no such thing as sort of like using the wrong colour. It's about using the shades and things like that. Yeah,
and I think I've not come from a traditional background. My degree was in industrial design, so I've not come through that background of sort of colour theory and stuff. But yeah, there is, as you say, there are some clear associations: green for nature and natural, that sort of thing, and you have purple for sort of rich and luxurious generally, and and there are other things as well. I think my personal view on it is similar, really, is that there are these sort of generalizations about it, but there's lots of nuances in between. And also, I think if you can sort of look at it two ways. If a certain colour is associated with a certain sort of industry, then it might make sense to keep within that hue and use that for industry because that's the norm. But I do think also sometimes there's the answer that, well, why don't you do something different that makes you stand out from everyone else who's doing that as well, assuming it doesn't have a negative connotation, obviously. But blue is your general. The shades of blue are generally used for corporate. They're seen as sort of fairly safe. It's why I chose mine. In hindsight, it doesn't represent me as a person as much as it probably should have done, but I sort of went with that safe corporate sort of feel. But blues are generally with that. You get the reds and yellows are all about the more immediate stuff, the more in-your-face stuff. That's why a lot of the fast food restaurants, all that sort of stuff's in reds and yellows. Orange is generally seen as a sort of energy thing, but it's also it's the combination of colours. So orange will have that sort of impact if you used it with grey or something else more muted. But if you're using it with red and yellow, then you're not going to see it in quite the same way. It's about having an accent colour potentially as well, having a base colour and something that stands out. So yeah, I don't think there's any hard and fast rules. It's got to be, again, it's got to be appropriate to you, really appropriate to what you want to represent, and it can't tell the story on its own. But if it's appropriate to you and it doesn't have any obvious negative connotations, then that's fine. Oh, as Marie-Louise frozen.
So when someone comes to you to say, I mean, we're going back to the logo rather than the whole brand. What do you need from a client to get you started and have some idea of where to sort of start out?
Yeah, I mean, because it's a regular question, is how much for a logo, and the answer is, what do you need? Because it'd be like somebody saying, I don't know, how much to do an extension on my house. Well, how many floors is it, and how big's your house, and what sort of thing is it? And there's so many things. So I don't know with Marie-Louise, but what I tend to have is a questionnaire which covers some of those points. I try not to get into details, but you could ask, have you got favourite colours? Have you got colours you hate? That sort of thing. But I don't tend to ask those questions anymore. It's more asking about questions about their company. What do you do? How do you do it? What is it that if you wanted to sum up your company in a couple of sentences, what's different about it? How do you compete with your competitors? What are you doing that they're not doing? And sometimes when you do a sort of, I tend to do a lateral thinking.
I've got bad signal, so I don't know if you got something in the chat.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, no worries, that's fine. Yeah. So Marie-Louise has just said in the chat there, if you can put in your, if you want to tap in your sort of brand colours, your favourite colours, that sort of thing. So it'll be a little survey that she's running in there. But yeah, so it's about getting a feel for the company and how you feel about your company. And I tend to do a lateral thinking exercises, which quite often gets deeper down, and you get to understand what the person's what their reasons for starting the company are, what their ethics are, and actually it's then less about what they do, it's about who they are and how they do it, and that can sometimes, not always, but sometimes that can draw stuff together. It's those conversations that little things might come out, whereas if I just looked at somebody said to me, oh, I'm a computer programmer or whatever, oh right, okay, well I need to do a logo with a computer in it. Well, no, that's not appropriate. But that's people's first thought is, oh, I need to have that in my logo. When you talk to them, it might be that they've, I don't know, something in their history, or I don't know, there could be anything that John put it together. I had a client who's a insolvency practitioner, and part of the way that we evolved his logo was that he is a big fan of Ultimate Frisbee. Just plays Ultimate Frisbee, this particular Frisbee competition thing. And so we had his basic logo, but we incorporated something that had a sort of Frisbee feel for it. And actually by doing it, it looks like a shield, which could be protecting that company. You know, it could be a protection, like a Captain America type shield. It could be somebody could read all sorts of things into it. Again, as long as they don't read something obviously negative, and it's good to pass a logo around a few people just to check, you know, that you've been so absorbed looking at it, you haven't seen something, missed something odd, because there are some horror shows. If you look up bad logos, there are some horror shows where people have not realised what their logo actually looks like, and you've got to be careful of that. But beyond that side of things, and it being appropriate and simple and versatile and clean put together, it's personal taste. It's about you. It's about your company, your business. So I try and get those things out of people, and you can start with a question there, but I generally have a meeting with them for a couple of hours and draw information out. It's just about those longer questions, the open questions, really. It's probably not answered your question thinking about it, because there's no straight answer with it. It's what fits, but yeah, I just get to know them. That's the thing. I don't think you can do it in isolation, really. And that's the difficulty with these online things is, you give them the company name and what you do, and they just work out the rest. Well, they don't know anything about you. No, doesn't have anything about it. You know, like the first thing comes to mind, Starbucks coffee. I know there's a story behind what the sort of, I think that's the name of a character in something, isn't it? I think the mermaid character or something. But you know, there's a story behind it somewhere. Then you don't need to know the story, but it makes the brand. That's the whole point. Are you still with us, Marie-Louise, or are you looks like she's frozen again?
She doesn't text me.
I am. Yeah, I was just typing some answers to the colour.
Try it without your video if it's really breaking up.
Oh, no, stop my video. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll be faceless then.
Yeah. So put it back on, but if it does start breaking up, I'll just switch it back off again and see what I think. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I did miss some of what Sarah was saying earlier. It kind of, there was a real nice patch of being really gurgled. Yeah, no, I think the whole colour thing can be a whole, you know, topic within itself. It's a very interesting, the colour psychology behind it. But it's thinking about who you are as a person, and you know, often you know, your clients are a version of you. So particularly with small businesses, I think you can often, the colours you like as your business and what you want in your brand can be both in the same, and that's fine too. But I guess if you do that work to think about who you are, what you're offering, you know, what's your unique selling point, and all of these things will feed into how you make decisions on, like, any icon that you would bring in, that imagery, the text style, you know, those fonts that you use. Is it something swirly or is it something minimal? And you know, making sure, ideally you want it to appeal and speak to your target market, but often when you're starting out, particularly, you don't know who your target market is, and you might think you have a target market, and that changes over time as you sort of build your business. So you know, it comes back to again those core values, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think there's a presentation I've done before now where, you know, you say about, people might think, well, it doesn't matter really what's on the logo to some extent. And I use an example of Lloyd's Bank. You know, they've got their horse logo and they've got the text underneath it. Does it really matter if you change stuff? Well, if you change the horse for My Little Pony and then put multiple colours across the bottom, yeah, it changes it completely. It still says the same thing. It still says it's a bank, but not a bank you'd probably trust. In the same way as if that was a toy company, it looks a bit serious and a bit, you know, somber, doesn't it? So you've got to be appropriate with all this stuff, and colours is all part of that. I think the question you missed, Marie-Louise, possibly was from Nicholas, just saying about what do we as designers need in order to, what information do we need in order to create a logo for somebody. And I was saying that about, I do a questionnaire, but also have a meeting with them, is to get in depth about them, really. I don't know whether you want.
Yeah, I have a questionnaire as well that I've built over time, where the kind of questions in it's gotten more in depth, because I don't want to do just something that's very surface level. You know, obviously you want a logo to look attractive and have qualities like being simple, so that there is a practicality behind it. But equally, you know, you need to have some sort of chat. It depends. I have created a logo where I just sort of sent over the questionnaire and it was all done by email. We didn't even have a phone call. So it depends. But I think ultimately, if you have a relationship with your designer, you're going to get a better result out of it. I found that clients that I know quite well, through years of networking or whatever, I can get to the heart of the thing much quicker and easier.
Absolutely, yeah.
If it helps, what I found useful when I rebranded, because I'd not really spent as much time on branding as I probably should. However, in time, I'd sort of created a brand, but sometimes it's not obvious what that brand, touching on what Mark says, what are people left with, what do they feel sort of after, when you're not there about your brand. And I just did things like approached existing customers and asked them just to come up with 3 words or 3 phrases that described what they felt about being part of my business. And that would, I think, Mark and ML have both been on my journey of rebranding and supported me. And I think that was quite useful, wasn't it, Mark, to sort of look at, make sure that my values were consistent, how my brand was being perceived. The little scrap line, grow through collaboration support, that really came from, the common words that people came up with about how they felt their experience was. And I think that helped us, didn't it? Sort of like craft it and design it and come up with, the color schemes and the fonts and the logos and stuff like that.
Yeah, and it can be sometimes be a surprise as to what people's view of your company is. Hopefully, normally a good one, as opposed to what you think it might be, about. And I think there were a few things in there that were some really positive comments, but stuff that you didn't realise that people viewed the business in that way. It was really, really interesting, great insight. So that all helps.
But also, we sort of talked earlier about, with the icon and how other people can maybe see other shapes or things in it. And sort of with Paul's logo, when I sort of had a sneak preview, I sort of saw a sweetie shape in it. I mean, obviously, when I looked closely, I could see that it had a sort of DNA helix type thing. And, I did have a bit of fun, ribbing Paul for that. But, it's just because other people might see something else in it initially, again, because it's not a negative thing. I think seeing a sweetie shape in it, and then when you realise the meaning behind it, it's fine. I think,
I think that's it, isn't it? Over time, initially, there was a few people sort of saw that initially, because it does, that's the nature of that DNA. If you want to avoid that sort of connotation, you have to make it so much more complicated. But when you simplify the DNA down to something, you do get something along those lines. And we tried a few other ways to sort it out, but actually, it was all about the DNA, and over time, that's what those other ideas of it have sort of faded away. Really, I think that's.
I don't think it matters. Although I've not forgiven ML, I'm not bitter at all. I think the fact that someone's still recognise it as your logo,
that's the key.
And they're talking about it, it doesn't matter, does it? No. And if it's a bit of a joke and to what I said is, some people see it as a sweet. The more educated amongst us see it as a DNA swirl. So you just make a bit of a joke out of it, but it's still people talking about your brand, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
it's not a negative. That's the thing. It's not a negative connotation. If there was something,
isn't it that all publicity is good publicity? Isn't it that saying?
You're just trying to get back in my good books now, Mel.
No, there isn't actual saying of that. So has anyone else got any questions? Because we're going to be running out of time, I'm pretty sure of that. If you don't want to be on the video, Okay, if you want to sneak in a question, you can either unmute yourself and ask away, or if you don't want to be on the video, just type in the chat box below.
It might be worth saying. It might be worth saying, at the risk that, like I'm saying, I'm promoting something specific to me, but both Mark and ML have contributed articles about branding and the use of colour and things like that in a book that I've put together. That's a free PDF. So I'm happy to share that with Marie-Louise. Well, she's probably got the link anyway, so she can share it with you, or just share those articles, because that might be useful for you. You know, just going through, well, some of what Mark and Marie-Louise.
Share it into the lovely Canva crew group, and just sort of say this sort of covers some of what we chatted about. This recording will be uploaded probably at some point when I've got actual Wi-Fi, to be continued. Yeah, feel free to add that.
If you want to tag me in it or remind me, and I'll put the link there so people can get access to it.
Thank you. Any questions then before we sort of wrap up?
I don't think we've got nothing in the chat I can see, so. I think that's a no, Marie-Louise. I think we're all done. Everyone's questions are answered.
Okay. Well, I shall try and put the video back and just wrap up. So if anyone has any questions who watch this on replay, I know there were some people who, despite my best efforts, couldn't find the link, and you know, general sort of fun and games with Wi-Fi today. Just feel free to post questions in the group, or you can message me, and we can always do like a follow-up call on this topic. There are so many aspects, but Mark's in the lovely Canva crew, so he can jump on. There's a couple of other design-related experts in there, so there's loads of different things. So yeah, just get involved, or if you're working on something, I know Danny King has been sharing her sort of DIY logo and how that's progressing, and it shows that, you know, someone with no experience as a designer, you know, no prior experience, can create something great from scratch. And it's just about fine-tuning it, you know, so feel free to ask for feedback, and go from there. So thank you for joining us. Apologies for you know, the technical hitches. I think we got through it. It sounds like a couple of people found this session interesting, and we'll share the link to the articles that Paul Green was talking about. And he says, well done, #BFF and #Canva Girl. Yay! Thank you so much for joining. And if you could just end the meeting, Mark, because you posted this on my blog.
Yeah, no worries. All right, thank you.
Well done, guys. Very good.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.